So on April 26th, Sledgehammer's Call of Duty World War II's reveal trailer was released, and it's mostly been received positively. And I will admit, I got excited when I saw the trailer initially, but after the dust settled and I got to thinking, I realized that this happens with pretty much every Call of Duty and its respective trailer. And I always think this is going to be the one that's going to change everything. This is going to be the one that I'm going to really, really enjoy. Now, I hope the game is good, and I bet it won't be terrible if that's any consultation, but we all got to realize that the Call of Duty we want, the one where the series goes back to its roots, does away with the season passes, microtransactions, the lazy PC port, the mostly slap-dick writing. It's not going to happen. At least not with this one. Let me explain why. People are expecting a fresh yet familiar take on Call of Duty here. The franchise started by taking place during World War II, but the last World War II Call of Duty game we got was Call of Duty V World at War, and the last time we got to play in a World War II setting in a single-player campaign was back in the original Black Ops. So a lot of people here are hyped that the game is doing away with the futuristic setting and ironically following in the footsteps of Battlefield 1's hype train. People are really excited for a game setting that hasn't really been explored in a first-person shooter for a while now. Every now and then we might get a World War II FPS like Day of Infamy, which is made by the Insurgency developers, which by the way is a really good tactical multiplayer FPS, but we don't get a lot of single-player World War II campaigns anymore. It also seems that Sledgehammer Games is committing to the setting. For starters, in the campaign, you're going to manually pick up ammo and health packs. There isn't any regenerative health, which is a little concerning for a game like this. If enemies have hit scan weapons, you are guaranteed to take damage, and that can be a huge problem. It's not like in the older Halo games where you had shields that could regenerate before you started losing health. My guess it's going to be like Far Cry 3 or Resistance 1 style, where you have health bars that recharge, but once you lose a full bar, you can't regain it until you get a health pack. So it's cool that it seems like they're mixing it up a bit, but every single time they talk about doing unique features in a Call of Duty game, in practice it almost feels very watered down and like it shouldn't be even in there in the first place because of how insignificant it is. If anything, they will probably litter the battlefield with health packs rather than design levels and enemy placement around them. It'll be just like Advanced Warfare, where you have this awesome grapple ability that lets you climb virtually anywhere, but it's mostly context sensitive until maybe the last few levels. Or like in Infinite Warfare, where you have free reign over a spaceship and you can fight other ships. Ooh, but it's still very watered down. You don't have a selection of ships, you don't have customization, you fight in a very constricted space. Do you see what I'm building up here? To me, people are getting excited for the wrong reasons for Call of Duty World War II, and the pre-order culture I've seen surrounding the game is just confirming that. And hey, if you end up liking the game, more power to you. You do you. But there was a reason why World War II shooters died off, but it's for different reasons than most people think. World War II is a boatload of interesting material to make a game from, but every game company back in the day, including Call of Duty often, just copied off the same movies over and over again. Call of Duty in particular sometimes did it shot by shot to the point of plagiarism. And these scenes have been copied by other movies too, scenes that have been parodied and in the end have been done to death a million times over. I'm not saying that movies can't be authentic for the sake of not being repetitive, but I'm saying that a video game adaptation of World War II can cover much more than just D-Day or the Nazi occupation of Stalingrad, i.e. Saving Private Ryan or Enemy at the Gates. Pretty much every World War II shooter was one of these two movies. This is what killed the World War II FPS genre for many of us. Not that we had a bunch of World War II Call of Duty clones, but they were all clones of clones. Every game used the exact same time periods in World War II, which means a wealth of vehicles, weapons, locations, even sides were not fully explored. It's just a lot of material that they never implemented into their games, and I understand if you want to do Normandy, you should do Normandy, but if you want to do Normandy, do it because you want to do it, not because Call of Duty's doing it, or because Saving Private Ryan's doing it. And after all these years, I'm still holding out for a good World War II FPS that focuses on playable Axis of Evil soldiers. Video game stories have matured enough that we could properly pull off a good story from that perspective. An example of a game handling dark subject matter in a war is a shooter by the name of Spec Ops: The Line, which was a seemingly mundane third-person shooter at first, but it dove deep into the horrors of war, and it even questioned the player's perspective on killing in video games. It's one of my favorite games without giving too much away. So with that being said, what does Call of Duty World War II have in store based on the trailer so far to shift itself away from World War II shooters that we haven't played before for the past decade? A perspective from the Americans, so that's 1942, and automatically we've killed any expectations for 1939 to 1941 warfare in the campaign. That era of warfare is rarely used, like I said before, and a lot of people online, through commenting on Reddit and YouTube on the trailer, were immediately disappointed. Not surprising. The game seems to only be taking place in Europe, so D-Day again, but if it's only in Europe, that means no Pacific warfare, so no Japanese. And again, it's seemingly only the Americans' perspective, so we probably won't have a Russian or British campaign. We might get a mission if we're lucky, but I'm not counting on that. So it seems to me that they are making a lot of the same mistakes that drove the World War II shooter genre into the ground in the first place. Limited perspectives in a war that literally took the combined might of every side to be as brutal and grand as it was, in addition to limiting the time period and seemingly enemy variety. Now again, if the game turns out to be good, that's cool, but I'm saying that it's not going to be this big game changer that everyone, Activision and Sledgehammer, are hyping it up to be. It's probably going to be a very scripted, by-the-numbers campaign, Americans good, Germans bad. Maybe the Italian army will be thrown in there, which I would be excited for, as that would mean more ground covered in Europe, and it won't be just Americans versus Germans. But because it's set in 1942, it will have most of the same weapons like in every other World War II game that we have seen trotted out repeatedly 10 years ago. But this time there's a nice new coat of paint, except it'll probably be more on rails than the older Call of Duty games and the respective clones were. Again, I'd love to be wrong, and if anything, I want the game to be good. But this game isn't going to be a game changer. World War II isn't done to death. Parts of it are. But Call of Duty World War II just feels like a rehash of those repeated events. It's hilarious that people are calling this a bold move for Call of Duty. They're just moving away from a tired and repeated formula to another tired and repeated formula, except it just hasn't been done for a while. It's funny, man, the last time to me a Call of Duty campaign was innovative was with Black Ops 2. You had the future RTS-style missions, which felt like a gimped yet still interesting Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2 mode. You had the story shifting back to other periods in time, and it wasn't restricted to just futuristic weapons. You had tons of scenery change. You also had fun set pieces that took advantage of the setting, including mechanics involved controlling drones in the future, which, while somewhat restricting, those segments were still fun. And on top of all of this, you had the multiple endings based on decisions that you made knowingly and unknowingly. This was all wrapped around a really well done villain character. I'm not a Call of Duty hater or fanboy. I've been playing these games for nearly 10 years now, since the original Modern Warfare back when I was about 12 years old, back in 2007. I still play the newer releases every now and then, but when I go back to the older ones, I find myself enjoying the hell out of them, more so than the newer releases. People want that era of Call of Duty back. They want that out of Call of Duty World War II, but that's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to see that big change from this one game. That was a completely different time for video games in general, when single-player campaigns came first before multiplayer, when we didn't get flooded with sequel after sequel, with season passes and microtransactions jammed in between. I guarantee you that this Call of Duty will not be a return to those days. Not yet, at least. Again, I think it'll be a decent game, and I might pick it up day one if the PC port is good, but I'm keeping my expectations low. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. I'm out.